Okay, live now.
Hello, welcome to the Node.js Community TSC meeting, September 13th, 2017. So far we have present Ali Sheikh, Anna Hennison, Brian White, Chalker, Colin Harrig, Evan Lucas, Jeremiah Sampico, James Snell, Miles Boren, Matteo Kalina, myself, Michael Dawson, Michael Zasso, Rich Trott, Rod Vag, Sri Sak3 Priyan, Baramy, and William Kapke. We have our standard agenda where we'll go through announcements, a review of the previous meeting, although I suggest we skip that because we have a fairly good amount of issues to go through. Does anybody have any announcements or discussion that they want under that section? I guess if not, then I suggest we go directly into the issues that we have tagged against the different repos. The first one on the agenda is the new TSC director chair elections, which is issue 236 in the TSC repo. I'm just going to open that one up. So last I looked, and I just want to confirm that, is it looked like we're down to, we put out the call for nominations just over 2 weeks ago with the goal of having like a 2-week time for people to nominate and self-nominate. At this point, we have only a single nomination for the TSC chair and a single nomination for the TSC director. Miles Borens is nominated as the TSC director, and I'm nominated as the TSC chair. I believe, based on our governance, that unless there's any objections, then that seems like we're at a consensus in terms of electing those two people as for those positions. So I'll throw it out to the group here as to see if there's any concerns or discussion on that front. So I guess I could take the fact that nobody's objecting, that we've basically reached a consensus on that, and so we'll move forward. Welcome, Miles. Congratulations. And
congratulations, Michael. Congratulations, Miles.
Yep. Thank you.
Congratulations, Michael.
Yep.
And thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, the same goes for me. It's I'm happy to continue to do what I can to help out on this front. Okay, so that's 326. So let's move on. The next issue is the TSC meeting schedule, number 336. Let me just open that one. Right. So with the merger of the TSC and the CTC, we have a larger group. I guess it's not that much different a group than the CTC was working. I know Rich re-looked at the spreadsheet we had into different times, and there was a proposal to shift a couple of the meetings to kind of even out the fairness. I think, Rich, do you want to talk to this one a bit more?
I'll answer questions, I guess. Looked at the spreadsheet and the times that seem to be the most fair, and were the three listed in that issue, which would be UTC 12 o'clock, UTC 1700, and UTC 2200. Yeah, tried really hard to make it so that most people will regularly miss no more than one of those time zones, one of those meetings, and that's what we came up with. And I see that, no, I'm looking in the, yeah, no, that's all I got to say for now, unless anybody has questions.
Is that earlier slot 1 hour later than it used to be?
Yes. In fact, so we're not using any of the 3 times that we're currently using. We're using my slightly adjusted time. One is 1 hour later, and actually, yeah, 1 hour later, 1 hour later, and 2 hours later. They're all slightly later.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is it's probably adjusted based on some people's availability. So if you just take a look and you know, if it looks like one of the things was moved to better fit your availability, you know, if it doesn't actually help or whatever, that might be something to comment on. But otherwise, it seems like you know, the way to go.
Yeah, as always, I encourage people to update that spreadsheet, the private spreadsheet, so that you know, the next time we adjust meeting times, you know, the data is there and ready to go.
So I guess our options are, this has been open for 7 days, so we could choose to give people more time to comment in GitHub, or we could agree that, you know, no, we've all had enough time to comment and say, yeah, that looks like a good set. What's people's input on those two options? Or if you have a different option, feel free to speak up.
I'll also say that if you include me, there are 6 plus 1 sounds good to me. You know, six people so far who have commented that looks good to them.
It seems there is one thing to say, Rich. It is probably good to have those times shift depending on daylight savings, because those times looking forward, like they might be okay, more okay for winter time to some extent than to summertime.
So yeah, that's come up before. One thing to bear in mind is that daylight savings shifts happen in the reverse direction for people in the opposite hemisphere. So like Rod, you know, his daylight savings will shift an hour ahead when mine shifts an hour back, and that results in a 2-hour shift, which makes you know, means that like if we move something back to accommodate me, you know, it might move something from 6 a.m. to 4 a.m. for someone like Rod, that kind of thing.
Right.
It gets tricky.
But I think we should.
I think it's good to periodically, like, you know, make sure we do take that into account by updating the spreadsheet perhaps quarterly and just seeing if anything changes.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to propose. So use this and then recheck maybe in an hour, in a couple of months' time after daylight saving goes into effect.
Yeah, I'd agree that we should check every time that happens, because I know like an hour could push it between, you know, yeah, you can make it, to just no, you can't make it, right?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of frequently tweaking the meeting schedule. I think I think that sort of goes hand in hand with my endorsement of the idea that membership should change, you know, with great frequency. To accommodate that, I think the meeting schedule has to be flexible, and therefore we should absolutely reevaluate. And, you know, ideally, I would say every 3 months is probably a good cadence, something like that.
Okay, so actually, I think so what I'm writing down is minutes here is like, it seems like we're in agreement that we should revisit quarterly, ideally aligned with daylight saving times changes. That sounds
about right.
Like if we did it both, you know, there's 2 daylight savings times, we did it those 2, so ideally we align those, and in between we should also do it at least, you know, once every 3 months. Sounds good to me.
I suggest just to keep the spreadsheet in the UTC and update rows for those locations where the daily savings goes into effect, because somewhere it's there is even no such thing as daily savings time.
Right. I guess I was thinking, you know, that if we can, I don't know if you're suggesting that we have like one person factor that in. I don't know. It might be easier to just have everybody adjust it. If you're in a place where daylight saving times doesn't change, you got no work. If you are, then it's, you know, the individual can can basically update or not based on whether it affects what they've got there. Otherwise, we're kind of like putting it on somebody to go through and try and figure it out and get it right. I think it's, my personal feeling is it's probably better as a distributed update. Gives you a chance to reevaluate if what you've put in there still makes sense for you.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Okay. So I guess back to the question of, are we all happy saying let's go with these times, or do we want to give more time for a GitHub discussion?
Sounds like we have
I
consent.
think we should move forward with the time and be quick to iterate if it seems like it's a problem.
I certainly agree with that. So unless it sounds like there's no objections, so I'll take the notes that we agreed we should move forward with the proposed times. Okay. Any other discussion on that front? Nope. Okay. The next issue is issue 301. So two-factor authentication for the entire org. I'm just going to open that one up. So again, Rich, you opened this one. I don't know if you have the latest status, or I see the last comment was like almost a month ago.
I know this issue. Can you say the number again, please?
It's 301.
So we had agreement on doing why did I put this on the agenda? Oh, I put this on the agenda quite a while ago. Yeah, and then a bunch of comments happened. Yeah, I think we're pretty much in consensus that what we want to someone correct me if I'm wrong. But what we want to do is step one, which is that every time a new member is added, we ask them to enable two-factor authentication. We want to do that, and then steps 2 and 3 don't require TSC buy-in. And after we've done step 1 and maybe 2 and 3 for a while, then we can come back and look at step 4 and see if it's time to just say 2FA everywhere. So I don't know that there's anything to discuss unless anybody has an issue with asking new people to please make sure we got 2FA enabled, although now I'm to make sure I'm caught up.
So one thing that we could do that might be worth exploring is YubiKeys are not that expensive, and they are useful as two-factor authentication on the GitHub org. We could ask the foundation if maybe they would be willing to get YubiKeys for all of the members, which could be provisioned and then sent out. Or we could run like a key signing thing again at the Collaborator Summit. But I think a lot of the concerns around two-factor was mostly around like kind of proprietary solutions or network access. But as long as someone has a USB, they can use a YubiKey. So maybe we just have to be proactive about enabling people to have two-factor.
Well, let's even see if people have a problem, because it just doesn't seem like it's been. I mean, I think it was mostly Nikita and I who like tried to get all the collaborators to be 2FA, and it just didn't seem like that was the problem. Like, I mean, I think there was one person who was like, "Oh, I don't have a smartphone. How can I make this happen?" And they just they eventually solved the problem. But it's good to have that. It's good to have that in our back pocket if it does turn out that this is a problem for people. I do strongly suspect that most of the problems that we that were kicked around when we were talking about doing it for collaborators ended up just not wasn't the problem for collaborators, and I have a suspicion it's just not going to be a problem for the wider community either.
The biggest issue is convincing people and telling people to enable it.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the biggest issue is remembering. Well, until we make it until we make it a requirement. Go ahead, Mateo. I'm sorry.
Well, it's definitely, if you enable this, we should have a policy that says that if you don't have the financial support, if you need financial support and you can't have, you don't have a smartphone, and you want a YubiKey or something like that, they don't cost much, so you can ask for one. So I don't think that's a big deal.
By the way, there is an SMS option for two-factor auth. SMS is not very good, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't need even a smartphone. You just need a phone. So
you don't even need that. You know, I mean, it's actually fairly trivial to have a script just on your laptop that does it.
So
Yeah.
The keys.
You just need better docs then.
Yeah, I mean, doing it on your desktop is not necessarily as secure, but it's certainly workable, and it's better than not having it at all. So.
We have a really full agenda.
Yeah, okay.
Move on.
Agreed. So it sounds like we have consensus, unless there's objections. Sounds like we're all agreed to move to step one. It sounds like we should also consider looking at, can we do something for people who have a problem? I think there's a motivation to do that. It also sounds like, Rich, you think we could defer worrying about that until it actually happens. And unless anybody objects to that, let's move forward. Okay, I don't hear any objections, so. And definitely, Rich, if we do have people who then, financially doesn't, let's bring it back to the top of the priority to figure out how we actually fund that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so the next issue is number 278. So this is candidate areas for the TSC and community committee. I opened this. There's nothing urgent on this front. My main purpose here is, I think that the TSC and the CTC, we've done quite a lot of the work we've done has been on sort of resolving conflict, not resolving conflict, but like sort of, if there were contentious issues, weighing in on those contentious issues. My personal belief is that, it would be good if we got into a little bit more forward-looking things. And this is sort of my attempt first attempt to capture some of the areas where, I think it would be good that we as a team are comfortable that, we're doing all the right things in those different areas. Some of them I think we'd look at and say, yeah, we're completely on top of it. There's a working group that's covering that. Other ones we may find that, we have individuals who are doing a good job, but that, we could use a little bit more organization to make things happen, or to be comfortable that, like, for example, do we update our dependencies at the right times and things like that. So really all I'm going to say further on this is it's a call to look at those areas, comment on if there's ones that are missing, and think about, how we might work on that going forward. So I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything on that one at this point. I think I'll take the silence as a no, but again, it's a call out to, think about. Sorry, go ahead.
There is there are metrics mentioned, okay, and I know that we are doing. There is the Node Foundation does yearly progress on the Node.js metric itself. But I don't know what is the right venue to try to make that a little bit less, have it more often, okay? Have the metrics about Node.
Right.
Especially because a lot of the things that helps driving the ecosystem and the module authors is the penetration of older versions of Node. and knowing the various line, how they are doing, how much they are being downloaded, and so on, might be extremely important. Sorry to bring it up. Just because I saw it, I just want to capture it so we can think about it. I don't know it.
I'm just going to say that, you highlighted that metrics is one where we might want to do more.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, if there's no other comments, I'll move on to the next issue, which is copyright date. It's number 195. So this, I guess, is a long-standing issue around the copyright date. I think, James, you've been tracking this one. I don't know if there's anything to say on this front.
Nope. I would say let's just close this one and pull it off the agenda unless anybody has any pressing reason to keep it there. It's not going to make any progress unless we go out and really push it with the Foundation Legal Committee.
And I guess the only downside is that we add some extra dates into our files, and was it really worth energy to change that, right?
Yep.
Does anybody have any strong feeling that no, this is something we really got to resolve? Otherwise, like for me, it might be nice to figure it out, but if it's going to take, it sounds like we've been trying and been unsuccessful, so it's going to take some sort of extraordinary effort to make it happen. So I'd tend to agree with James that we just close it unless we have some people who really feel strongly we need to do something and can help out.
Was this brought up to the lawyers from the board of directors?
This was brought up a long time ago. It hasn't been on the agenda recently at all.
Would it make sense for me to bring it up at the board one more time just to make sure that it's a non-issue, or do you think that we can just move forward?
You can try to get it on the board's agenda. Whether or not they'll actually be able to get to it within the time that they have is another story. Past 3 board meetings, they only got through maybe about a third of the agenda in the time that they had.
Okay. If you don't mind keeping this open for right now, I'd like to at least try to bring it up at one board meeting, and then if I don't have luck, I'll close it.
Okay, and what I'm going to suggest, though, is we're going to remove from TSC agenda. Is that okay? You can add it back on if and when something happens.
That works for me.
Okay. I will just remove that. Okay, regular roll-up of active working groups. So I'm just opening that. That's number 109. So there's a proposal to try and get regular roll-ups from the working groups in terms of what's going on. And I think that it kind of fits in a little bit with, if we're looking at the different areas and tracking and trying to think proactively about that, then having, insight into what's going on in the work groups makes sense. I guess at this point, if I look at what's there, other than having been, the activity is quite a long time ago. So we actually just need to do something like asking, we could do something like every month ask a different working group to come and talk about what's been going on if we're interested in that. So, do people here think that that's something they want to hear about?
It would be good for us to get more tie-in from the working groups. Whatever process makes the most sense. We've tried to get on this path before, never made any progress. So it would just be nice to have a concrete proposal and steps that actually make it happen.
And I think it would be a matter of, we have some existing work groups. We have the release work group, once we renamed LTS/release work group. the build work group, the benchmarking work group, we could just put a request that somebody show up and, you know, do one of those per month, see how it goes.
So the hard part with this is in a voluntary organization, getting someone to volunteer to put together something to present. And so the requests, this has all been requested for quite a while, but you know, it's just not something we have the volunteers to do. So again, this is we've put a call out there in the past just to the community to say, hey, if you're looking for a way to contribute, come in, listen to the meetings, and you know, do some roll-up reporting on what's been happening that can be bubbled up. But short of that, it's a hard ship to move.
I wonder if we could start with something more informal and just ask somebody to, like, not even necessarily to put together a presentation, just come and talk about what's going on.
Like I said, the idea has been out there. We've all agreed that it would be a good thing to do. It's just been lack of any kind of real execution on it. So
right. So
whatever.
it's, you know, but it's like, say, Rod, you know, would you be willing to come and just chat about what's going on the build working group?
I'm sure somebody would be from build. You know.
Right. And, you know, I'm thinking benchmarking, you know, I'm happy to come and just sort of talk about some of the things. I think avoiding, you know, a formal presentation, it would be, you know, maybe not as good as somebody putting together a formal presentation, but it might at least have, you know, there could be a discussion, and then people could ask if there were particular areas they were concerned or not concerned about.
A different approach might be to have the working group contribute that in writing, so that we can share those notes on a monthly basis.
Yeah, but as soon as you're back into the problem of you're asking potentially enough extra work and thought. Like, I don't know, I guess it depends for different people. For me to show up and talk about something for half an hour is easier than to go off and put something together in a coherent presentation that people can read through and get a lot out of, right?
Hey, Michael.
Yeah.
So two different ideas that I have. One is maybe we could try a different format. Rod, I know, for example, you've had a lot of success doing podcasts. Do you think a podcast type format might actually be easier? Because you're saying it's really easy to come and talk. Maybe this is the kind of thing that could be a rolling podcast from the foundation. I think a lot of people would be interested in that. We could also possibly generate some notes from our change logs. We have notable sections, and we could just expand on the notes from the notable sections of releases. Those are the two different ideas I'm kind of spitballing right now.
The podcast is interesting. My thought, though, with the discussion is, like, if you show up and you say, hey, we've kind of been working on that, it then kind of naturally leads into a discussion of areas people are interested in and where to go into more detail versus having to think about that and sort of plan it out beforehand.
I find that a lot of podcasts actually follow that format. At least that's the format I follow when I've been talking on them. Like, I don't really do a lot of planning. I just come and kind of talk about what's going on and see where the conversation lies. It could be interesting as a rolling thing. I'd be willing to maybe try to run with that format if people are interested in it. And I think I know enough people from the different working groups to corral people. I think it'd be easier to get people to come and talk for an hour than it is for them to get to, like, even write a paragraph.
I'm up for that. So any other suggestions or comments or objections to that? Like, otherwise we could say that Miles is going to try to get podcast style updates going.
Hey, Miles, wasn't part of your proposal back in Berlin about having the working groups make up the TSC partly so that there was a representative from each of those working groups to represent
Yeah, that was the proposal that I had opened, but
Oh, okay.
did not get any traction on it whatsoever. The feedback was generally negative from it, for that approach, so I closed the PR.
Yeah, James and I have talked about this. Like James started that idea and opened the PR. Michael and I have had conversations, and we had a big powwow about it. We had a big conversation about it at the Collaborator Summit. I think that that's still an idea that's worth exploring, but in the meantime, I think like something that's really low friction, like it creates more transparency, is kind of like a good first step.
Yeah, I definitely think so too. So if I guess you tried to collect maybe a few TSC members who were interested in participating, along with a few members of a work group, and then kind of get the discussion going there, right?
Yeah, I'll make a Google form and I'll send it to the TSC and the working groups, and then people can just fill it out with their interest and subject matter area. And then I'll just start making a schedule, and we can maybe even have something that's like weekly. I'll see what the response is like, and how much time it takes to actually do this.
Sounds good to me. Any more comments or discussion on this one before we move on? No? Okay, so I'm going to move on to issue under, this is not under, now moving on to the issues under Node.js Node. So the first one is 12857, which is remove readable and writable state. Dot length. It's been on the agenda, I know, a number of times before. I'm just going to pull it open.
Speaking, I put this on the agenda, this material.
Okay, great. I'll let you take it from here.
It's the overall point. This goes back a long time ago. Originally, this was brought up, if I remember correctly, let me check, on issue 445 on our issue tracker. For all of you that you are around, it's we are at 15 over 15,000. So this is 445. Okay, it has been around since forever, and the approach that it seems it works best for the member of the strings working group is to introduce accessor properties into readable and writable, so we can export some part of the state externally that's needed. So we don't have, so if there is a need to access any part of the state, there is no need to access underscore readable state, underscore writable state, and we can just access public properties. One of those issues is related to length, which is the amount of data that has been queued in the internal buffering of streams, which is the issue, that the first one of the issue. And there is a fellow member of the TSC, Ryan, that said that these approaches wouldn't want to follow that approach. This is more or less where we are at. At this point, I think either we solve that problem, like either we close all those issues and say the current situation is fine, or we do in this specific, or we try to solve it in this specific way. Okay. So this is the current situation. I hope it's clear. If anybody has questions, please feel free to ask.
So I don't know, Brian, if you want to add, like, why we wouldn't, it sounds like you have you believe we shouldn't do it. So if you just want to add anything on that front in terms of why not.
I mean, really the main thing for me is I would prefer not to see us tack on a whole bunch of other properties to people's objects more than we already have. I think having them corralled into separate objects like we have now is a better solution. That way we're not having a potential of collisions with anybody else's properties that they're already using. So that's about it for me.
Like just to be clear, are you saying that you are fine with the current state, or do you have any alternative proposals?
I mean, keeping it, I mean, it's not ideal to keep an underscore prefix, but I mean, if none of the other alternatives are acceptable to everyone else, then yeah, I guess we could just keep it the way it is.
Is what you're suggesting effectively to make writable state or some part of writable state public API? Like even if it's underscored, just consider it public API?
I would really prefer not to do that. And like, I mean, I get that it's not pretty to like attach new properties in bulk to the writable and readable streams, but I would still prefer that to making underscore properties like this is what we officially do in Node.
Currently, there are several use cases that you can't implement without accessing those properties. You can't explain how streams work without taking into account the state machine that is described in there.
Exactly.
So just to clarify the current state of things, okay? So some of those properties are public anyway in some form or another. I think that the discussion that Brian was referring to was to have a separate object, which is not what we have right now prefixed, but it's a separate object that accesses the one that we have prefixed, because that we can change because people are using that, at least not for a while. And have it, and that this object have an accessors that refers to the other one. My main problem with this proposed approach is that it allocates even more object and even more structure on the when we allocate a new stream, which it's been a problem over the past while. It has always been a problem for the stream machinery.
I would like to hear Brian's response to my question if he has one.
What was your question?
If we should, if you think that a better path forward might be just to essentially consider underscore writable state, whichever readable or writable, as public API and perhaps document it as such.
I mean, it's already, as Matteo said, it's already pretty much kind of sort of documented in the stream stocks right now. I mean, but like I said, I don't prefer that it's documented as is because it's underscore prefixed. But I mean, if the performance and everything else for the other solutions don't work out or whatever, then I'm happy keeping it the way it is. And I don't know. I really don't care. I mean, like I said, it's already kind of sort of documented right now, so just documenting some of the useful properties probably won't hurt as much as just documenting it from, if it as if it hadn't been documented before in any shape or form. So I don't really care at that point, but that's only if none of the other solutions, performance-wise or whatever else, don't work for anybody else.
So is it safe to move on to the next topic now?
We
can take this back to GitHub.
There is this is going back to GitHub every we talked about this several times now. So I would really love to have a decision. So
Since it seems, sorry for interrupting, Matteo. Please finish.
yes, sorry, I just, so for me, it's fine to close all those issues, including 445. Okay, and we spoke with this even yesterday at the stream working group. For us, it's fine to close all of them. Okay, but this was requested at some point in May. If we looked at it, and it seems that was our preferred approach. So I am fine with. So the major two option is at this point either we follow that approach or we close all the issues, or somebody else start working on an alternative proposal, which is also a good thing. Okay. But those have been open for a bit and maybe blocking other stuff as well. So I would love either a vote or somebody, or I can assemble a spreadsheet with the two options or whatever you want, folks. But there is a bunch of issues that is being, bunch of issues and PRs that are open, lingering in limbo because of this. So sorry to be bothering, but
Yeah.
you one, but they have been
Matteo,
blocked.
Matteo, since it seems like there's a handful of people who have opinions and it could just use a little more time, would it be helpful to maybe spin up just an interest group on that might make up you and Brian, Anna, and Jeremiah, and have one or two meetings to come up with, between the people who are invested in this, like a clear proposal, which may even after one meeting just be to close the issues. This seems important, and it also seems like we're rushing because there's 7 minutes left in the meeting, and it would be a shame to rush something like this.
It's been open for I don't know how many months. There's nothing being rushed here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Also, I don't really want to spin up another group or be a part of it.
I don't know if there's really anything unsaid at this point. I mean, is there? I mean, I think we're kind of just at an impasse. Would you say that that's right, Brian and Anna and Matteo and others?
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned, Matteo, whatever approach you're recommending is the one I'm in favor of personally.
I am fine with both so truly I'm fine with both the approach. So I am advocating for let's make a decision. Okay. We can make a decision next time, but I will keep wasting another 10 minutes speaking about this time. You decide.
I think it sounds to me like it's time to basically say these are the options, vote, and just close and come to a decision.
I'm fine collecting the votes by via email, writing a text and says, folks, decide, please. Otherwise, I just close the issues, but because there's no decision.
Yeah, I'd like to call for a vote. And Matteo, would you could you open an issue to collect the votes?
Yes, I will open an issue with this later.
Unless anybody objects and thinks that we shouldn't have a vote at this time. I don't know.
That's fine.
Miles, is that okay with you?
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Me too.
Yeah, and just reference the issue so people can look at the lengthy back and forth and make as best an informed decision as they can.
Okay. Any other discussion on that one before we move on to the next one? No. Okay. The next one, which we'll try quickly cover, is number 15393. Backport V update to 6.1. I think Miles, you wanted to talk to that one?
Yeah, I can bring it up really quickly, and I think Anna can bring up a little more if I miss anything, but the short of it is that we have a pull request in to land 6.1 on V8 before it goes into LTS for V8 6.1. The V8 team has worked on putting together a patch set that will allow it to be ABI compatible.
Do you know that for sure?
I believe so. If we don't have that, then we shouldn't.
The discussion from the issue tracker, as I understood it, was like, I mean, we met with Michael today, and he said Yang maybe had worked on it, and it doesn't seem like Yang did anything.
Okay.
And I can do stuff. I mean, I consider myself totally capable of making this ABI compatible.
Yeah. I guess the short of it was like, is this even something that we should be putting work into? Are there people who are gonna like have a problem with trying to push it forward? From the V8 team side, 6.1 has a non-trivial number of patches on top of 6. It will make long-term maintenance of the branch much easier. Although I would simply say if it's not ABI compatible, it's not going to happen. that it seems, I got the impression that the team thinks it's possible. So, we're about a month to a month and a half away from LTS, and that may make people uncomfortable, which is totally reasonable. So I just wanted to see if it was a non-starter for people, or if we should put time in this week to see if we can get it done.
I'm wondering, James, I think in the past we almost, didn't we, and maybe I'm remembering wrong, didn't we set some sort of timeline as the latest before LTS at some point? Not that we have to stick to that, but just as a data point.
We've talked about nothing less than a month before. Depends on when we're planning on taking 8 LTS. If we're looking at October 1st, then it's pretty. I think it's too short of a time frame. If we're talking about October 31st, then that's something else entirely.
We originally did say 2 months.
Was 3 months? Okay.
2. I think he said 2, right?
2. Yeah. 2.
But usually when we've done that, we've put out a call to cutoffs for Semver majors, and I don't think that we've done that yet. Not to go either way, but just.
Well, what do you mean by a cutoff for Semver majors?
Oh wait, I'm mixing up 2 different processes. My mistake. We can go and look at when we landed LTS V8 in the past, but I mean, either way, if people are uncomfortable with it, we don't need to do it. If people are comfortable with it, we should. So I guess maybe I'll to just be very explicit. Is anyone -1 on doing this?
I guess we have to set our ship, if we're going to do end of October, that's different than beginning of October, right?
Mm-hmm. And it seems like a reason to push it to the end of October. We haven't decided a date yet. And based on the LTS Pro, the one that we did the last time, I believe we added a thing that said we would give at least 2 weeks notice. So we're within the window of doing either. We can set the date anywhere in October as of right now. So with that being said, I think we have the flexibility to move into LTS in order to put this in if we want to.
I'd have to look at it to be able to give a decision one way or the other, but it's largely going to depend on what moving up to 6.1 buys us versus what the potential risks are for breakage. I mean, so if we can absolutely say that there is no ABI breakage at all and it's faster, then okay. But if there is even a potential for ABI breakage, then I'd prefer to hold off.
So with that being said, and considering we have an LTS meeting on Monday, how about we do that research this week and we pump the decision to the LTS working group? Are people okay with that?
Works for me.
Yeah.
Happy to push these decisions to the working groups. Yes.
Yes.
Maybe
Okay,
a step for that would be to create release candidates with it as well, kind of like we did with 6.0.
I think we'd want, I think that's a good idea. We'd need to do that quickly because I think even if we say yes, we probably maybe, I don't know. I mean, I could see going closer than 2 months, but closer than 1 month seems awfully close to me. Certainly if you said the week before, I'd be well, that seems way too close. I don't know what other people's feelings are.
The primary reason for objecting in the past has been simply that if we don't have long enough to have experience with the performance profile and what we're locking ourselves into, then there's a higher risk of going into an LTS with something that we regret. So that's been the case, but maybe we view this as a special case because of Turbofan. I think that complicates the decision a lot.
As I was just poking at, is there a drop dead date that people think is there, or we depending on the benefit and risk, we can go right up to the end.
I'm willing to say that we have 2 days. I'm in the Munich office with the V8 team. I can figure out what the risk profile is by talking to them, and we can have something to present to LTS on Monday. to make an informed decision, if we'll even test it. And we can do a release candidate also pretty easily and just see if that brings up anything weird. So let's collect more information, and we're not punting it by that much. And if we decide not to do it on Monday, that's totally cool. And we're not like pushing off the release or anything to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Who makes up the LTS meetings these days? I haven't been able to make that meeting time for a couple of months now. Who's on that?
I've been going. James has been going. Michael, Gibson has been showing up. Ali shows up sometimes now. You're sitting across from me, so I just like imagining it.
Sam has definitely been there regularly.
Mm-hmm. We could also change the time on Monday. So for what it's worth, I'm looking at my calendar and noticing that I'm on a flight that overlaps with the meeting. So if it helps, maybe we can push the meeting forward a couple hours so that more people can attend. But maybe we can move that to the LTS tracker and come up with a time for Monday that more people can attend. Or handle it on the issue tracker altogether.
Yeah, I have a conflicting meeting in that slot every week now, unfortunately.
Can we move this to the LTS issue tracker?
Yeah, let's do that. And because I think just that general comment, we should look for a different time where we can, allow you to make it. Okay, so unless there's objections to research will be done this week and they'll be presented at the LTS working group. Anybody who's interested could attend that and the decision will be made there. Doesn't sound like it, so I'll leave it as the notes. Okay, so I think that's the last one is issue 165, and there's been some discussion on that, but I think we'll leave that. I think where it's at now is that any further discussion should be at least in the private section for today. So we'll move on to the Q&A. Do we have any questions, Jeremiah, in terms of questions in IRC or the issue?
1 second. Did we talk about the CV thing at all? CV management process for Node.js? Did I just miss that?
Sorry, which issue?
Security Working Group 33.
Okay. Yes, the one I added. Yeah, okay. I should have remembered that. I guess I didn't add it to the minutes. Sorry. Right. That one is around, I'll introduce that one. That one's around how we handle our CVE issuance. Today we basically have to submit a request through MITRE. We haven't had good luck in turning that around quickly. In our discussion, I actually had a meeting with a representative from the MITRE team. His suggestion was that we actually become a CNA. And that's basic, what that basically means is that we're in charge of the CVEs that get issued for Node. The way it would work practically day to day is that they'll give us a block at the beginning of the year based on how many we think we'll need for the year. And then we can basically assign those ourselves. We still do need to use the tool to post the information back to them. But in terms of getting a CV number and using it, we just pull them from the pool we have. If we ever run out, we have to request a new pool. The other key thing is that there is some reporting required, and that we need to report on the CVs that we've issued. From my discussion, it doesn't sound like that's going to be a significant amount of work. The other advantage to being a CNA is that we get the first right of refusal effectively. So if somebody outside of our organization tries to go to MITRE to raise a CVE, and they'll defer to us to decide whether it is a vulnerability or not and issue that CVE. There is a dispute process, so if the person reporting the vulnerability disagrees with us, they can still challenge that and bring it up to MITRE. But it does insert us into the loop of deciding whether things are vulnerabilities or not. So my proposal, having discussed it with them and Sam, is that we just go ahead and do that. It would mean we would be able to issue our CVs more easily. We get a bit of control over, who decide. We get to be in the decision-making process of what's CVE or not. And, my current thinking is that it will help us tighten up our security process, being able to document it and make it easier to turn things around when we do have a security vulnerability. With the main downside being, we have a bit more work in terms of the reporting side of things. So the reason I added it onto the agenda is that, we're thinking, we've discussed that, Sam and I, in terms of the scope of the security working group. There's an issue where it's been discussed, but this is something that, the overall organization is taking on. So I wanted to make sure that nobody in the TSC group had any objections or concerns about, us doing that.
Are there any other downsides?
Yeah, the only downsides I can really think of is that there's that bit of work where, you have to manage the CVEs and you need to do that reporting. In the discussions, none of the other things I asked seem to be a downside.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, it seems like a reasonably good idea to me too.
There's a non-trivial people overhead there, just from experience managing security stuff. Unless someone's going to be dedicated to doing this and actually has the time for it, then we shouldn't dismiss that as a real cost on the org. I'm not saying I'm not saying it's a -1 for me. I'm just saying this is taking on additional administrative burden for an org where we've had trouble managing administrative burden.
Yeah, I agree that is the concern, and that's the discussion I had with Sam was, assume you and I have to do this. Do we still think it's a good idea? That doesn't completely mitigate the issue, but
there's also something to be said about responsibility on it. Like, having another org that's responsible for this does offload a lot of pressure, completely aside from the amount of work. And having an ongoing thing, like, we have the expertise to potentially do this today, but like, if that expertise is not interested in doing that work or doesn't have the time, we could find ourselves in a position where we don't have people who can manage this, which could be problematic. It seems like the kind of thing that
we've been having.
Pardon?
I was saying it's the same problem we've been having with anything. That we need people to actually be engaged in the process in order to be able to drive things forward. As a proposed process, it sounds great, as long as someone's actually willing to do the work to do it.
Right.
Is this the kind of thing that we?
Go ahead.
Go for it.
I was just going to say, and I think Sam and I are signing up to do that work for now. You're right that, that's not forever. So, it's still a concern.
So is this something that we could potentially rely on a vendor from the community to do, and yet has a security arm? SNCC is a member of the foundation, NodeSource is a member of the foundation, IBM, Google. We have a number of companies, perhaps an organization that has funding to support this and invest in it as a long-term option. Is that like a trust model that we could do?
I feel like trusting MITRE would be better for that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the other option.
I would say that's probably not an ideal model, although it does sound like IBM is offering to take on the load themselves if it's Sam and Michael. So maybe that's not so different.
Yeah, on the assumption that it's not particularly, there isn't a particularly large load. If we discover that's completely wrong, I think we'd go back to MITRE and say, sorry, we're handing it back to you. The other thing that was discussed is HackerOne is a tool which will help you manage security reports. In terms of that, though, it doesn't necessarily solve the problem in that it only handles reports that people submit through that tool, and it's not clear that the people doing that work, are interested in using the tool yet either. So. We don't actually need a decision immediately either. Like if people
If
do
we
have
don't-
concerns and we want to have more discussion, I would say, go back to GitHub, but make sure to comment in the issue.
So if we don't need a decision, I would strongly recommend that we push it to next week and ask people to go back to GitHub because we're 12 minutes over.
Yep, agreed.
We have a private segment to cover as well.
Yep. So I'm going to leave it on the agenda and basically, ask people who do have concerns to jump in the discussion there, and we'll bring it back again in terms of the next one. Is that okay with everybody?
Yep.
Okay, and I guess Jeremiah, since you'd asked for questions, do we have any questions in QA?
We have something that I don't really understand. So someone either asks or states that I have not seen any simple solution to use Node.js user level access control along with implemented Angular and React. I don't really understand. I asked them for clarification, but that was long enough ago, probably.
Okay.
Try asking Node.js /help repo.
Yeah, I did link to that already.
Okay, so I'm just taking the notes that, we're not sure what the question is, and try using the help repo. Any other questions?
Not that I don't have any other ones that are posted, so.
Okay, so based on that, we'll move on. The last thing is the upcoming meeting. So as always, from the minutes, there's the link to the Node.js calendar, Foundation calendar, which we will look to get updated with the new times for the future meetings. And at that, I think we'll call it for the public section.
All right, thanks everyone.